Do you ever feel like love makes you disappear? Like the closer you get to someone, the more invisible you become? That's a real thing. You're not imagining that. It's very common. It used to be me, unfortunately. But fortunately for you, I figured out what's going on. What's happening is you believe that the price of connection is self erasure. And you believe that because you've had it reinforced over and over and over again in your life. So in this video, I'm going to show you what it means to abandon yourself in relationships, why you do it, and provide you with a framework that will help you begin the work of unlearning the belief that your needs are a threat to someone loving you. Let's start by explaining the exact components of self-abandonment using my self-abandonment matrix. People who bury themselves to stay in relationships usually follow a predictable pattern that I'm going to explain to you using this 2x2 grid. And it maps out how this plays out emotionally. By the way, there's a link to notes in the description. You don't have to worry about writing all this down. I got you. The y-axis measures internal safety, which is your capacity to stay regulated even when others show disapproval of some kind. Another way you can think about internal safety is it's emotional security within yourself. It's your belief in yourself that you can handle discomfort and stay regulated and just, you're gonna be okay. Like, misunderstandings or disagreements don't haunt you, and you don't actually think it is a reflection of how much they care about you. You understand that people disagree or show disapprovals or get annoyed with one another every so often, and it's not a reflection of how lovable you are, okay? Having high internal safety would be toward the top of the matrix, and that means you trust yourself to survive emotional discomfort. Low internal safety is the bottom half, and that usually drives a person to be reactive or to fawn or to avoid. On this matrix, the x-axis, so the one going across, represents self-expression. That's your ability to voice your needs, your preferences, your boundaries, your emotions, and especially when doing so might cause friction with the people around you. But there's a caveat to that, because self-expression alone doesn't mean authenticity. You can speak up, you can share a lot, you can even seem very confident, but if that expression is not grounded in internal safety, it's not truly you showing up. It's a performance designed to manage how others see you. So high self-expression only becomes healthy when it's paired with high internal safety. Because without that inner sense of security, without the belief that you can handle disapproval or discomfort, your self-expression turns into shape-shifting. You're over-explaining. You're auditioning for love. It becomes a tool for control. It's not about connection. Low self-expression, on the other hand, often looks like silence or suppression or masking your truth to keep the peace. So you're trading your honesty for a sense of safety. So the real goal here isn't just to speak up more, it's to build the internal safety that allows your expression to come from truth and not fear and not out of control. And remember, these aren't fixed categories. Whenever I give you some sort of matrix or category list or quiz or anything like that, it always means to represent a cluster of behaviors that you may be falling into. It is not your identity. We do not live in one box forever. Just like attachment style, we move around into different roles, but we may have one default positioning that comes more effortlessly to us because it's what we've internalized. And we can do the work of making the unconscious conscious and changing how we show up. So now that you understand the components of the matrix, let's go through the 4 different archetypes of self-abandonment. What does it look like if you struggle with expressing yourself and feeling safe in your own emotion? That's what you get in the bottom left quadrant. I call this type the ghost. This person's authentic self disappears. So the person they're in a relationship with, it could be a friend, it could be a partner, a romantic partner, it can be a family member. They want that person to stick around, so they hide themselves completely, both internally and externally. This can look like classic people pleasing. So they're over apologizing, they're obscuring what they want, they're obscuring whether they're comfortable or uncomfortable with something in order to prevent any potential ripple, any sort of fight or any sort of disagreement. They cater to the other person in order to be accepted. When it comes to people pleasing, when the other person is okay, that means the people pleaser is okay. It's typically for anxiously attached people because the core component of people pleasing is to manage and to try to control for other people's emotions. You're trying to pull emotions out of them. A friend of mine unknowingly shared the perfect example of a people-pleasing ghost. She essentially told me that she had this conversation with her therapist and she didn't realize how far she'd gone until she couldn't name a single thing about herself or like what she liked without checking with herself or with him about how her boyfriend felt about it first. She just couldn't go. She didn't know herself at all. She completely disappeared. So that idea of not knowing what you like, that encompasses both the inability to express something as well as the inability to regulate your own internal state without another person's input. The ghost can also look like a martyr, which is a person who feels as if suffering quietly will prove their worth somehow. So they don't just silence their needs, they actually make a virtue out of not having any needs. They believe that suffering and self-sacrifice makes them morally superior or more lovable. It's an internal experience. And so it's sort of like, how many times have you said, I'm fine, don't worry about me, when they should have worried about you? Or how many times have you heard your mom say that, for example? But this is a recipe for deep resentment because most of the time the martyr believes they have to shrink themselves in order to be good. But they're secretly hoping someone notices how much they're giving up. Their worth becomes tied to how much they can endure without asking for anything in return, which is a recipe for deep loneliness or suppressed rage or the heartbreaking belief that love has to be earned through pain. The ghost could also look like a caretaker, so they feel if I'm useful, I won't be abandoned. They also think love is earned, but the people pleaser thinks it's earned by avoiding conflict, and the martyr thinks it's earned by suffering. The caretaker earns love through service. Their identity becomes wrapped up in being helpful and needed and indispensable. They believe that if they are always giving in some way, they'll secure their place in people's lives. But again, that comes from a place of fear, and it will lead to exhaustion. It will lead to resentment and relationships that are built on obligation rather than true intimacy. But wait, there's more. The examples I've given so far are of more anxiously attached people, but the ghost can be avoidant also. And that avoidant self-abandonment, doesn't look like enmeshing yourself with another person. It looks like disappearing from the relationship entirely. It looks like going quiet, going cold, shutting down any needs that you have before anyone else has the chance to reject them. And so instead of over explaining or over functioning like the anxious ghost might, the avoidant ghost abandons themselves by numbing out or withdrawing or pretending they don't care about the relationships or like what goes on in the relationship. But the core wound is the same. If I show you who I really am, if I admit I need something from you, you're going to leave me. You're going to hurt me. You're going to use it against me. And so they abandon their own vulnerability first as a way to stay safe. But safety by shutting down isn't real safety. It's just self-protection at the cost of true connection, which is the theme of all of these different archetypes. But now let's talk about what happens when you add some self-expression into the ghost archetype. That's when you get the performer. The performer is in the bottom right quadrant of the matrix. These are the folks who perform for love and affection. They may seem confident on the outside. They're often outspoken, they're expressive, they may even be described as charismatic, but it's disingenuous because it's still a mask they're wearing, and all of their behavior is driven by fear of abandonment or disapproval. You cannot have true self-expression unless you have internal safety, and performers do not have internal safety. They may think they're being honest and truthful, but deep down, they don't feel safe unless they're earning connection through performance. So this person is over-functioning. They may overshare. They may try to get people that they have to laugh. They feel like they have to put on a show in order to feel secure in a relationship. And remember, this doesn't just have to be a romantic relationship. Think about the class clown, the people who are always the funniest, who want others to laugh at them. They could be seeking out external validation, which is what this is all about. But the thing about the performer is the more they perform, the more they disconnect from their core self. Their identity gets shaped by how others respond to them, not by who they really are. They're so good at performing that it's hard to tell who they really are underneath that performance. They're kind of like a chameleon. They may have what seems like a dozen different personalities depending on who they're talking to. And by that, I don't just mean the normal healthy shifts in our behavior or our composure when we're in a different context. Like, you're not going to act or speak the same way at work as you would at a house party, for example. It would be weird. That's normal context switching. I'm talking about really drastic differences in their personality or even their opinions. And it's usually based on the person they're interacting with and if they're trying to get that person to approve of them. Because at first glance, they may seem expressive and very much like an open book, but that high self-expression is actually a tool for control. Deep down, they don't feel safe being disliked because they lack that internal safety. So they shapeshift to manage the emotional temperature in the room. Their presence is loud, but it's not coming from them. It's curated to maintain closeness and avoid discomfort. There is a lack of sincerity and authenticity there because they do not have that internal safety. If we go back to the first quadrant, the ghost is also trying to control people, but they're doing it by trying to disappear. They're avoiding being too much. The performer is avoiding by being over the top in order to not be abandoned. They think that if they're the life of the party or if they're super expressive, they can get people to come to them. Both the ghost and the performer are trying to control connection in opposite ways. The ghost fills in the negative space. They're shrinking themselves to stay safe. The performer takes up space. But strategically, neither feels safe enough to just be themselves. Now, this next type we're going to talk about is pretty rare because I would say they're in a state of transition. If you flip the experience of the performer, you get what I call the observer, who is high in internal safety, but low in self-expression. The way I think about it is this person is a former ghost who has acquired some internal safety within themselves, but they're still learning to use their voice. So they're halfway to where they want to go. They're just not quite there yet. When that person is in a transition state from the ghost archetype, they're usually someone recovering from anxious attachment, and they've gotten better with their internal validation process, but they're still struggling to express themselves on a daily basis and actually speak up for themselves and say what they mean and what they want. The observer stays quiet and it's pretty much self-contained in a relationship. They may not speak up much. It's because they still feel like they need to react carefully. They're building inner safety and learning to regulate themselves without needing to overexpress themselves. Interestingly enough, there's also usually some rage in there, and they're really afraid that if they start talking, they'll let it out. Because remember, the ghost in a lot of ways was suppressing themselves, and they are starting to feel resentful of the people around them for mistreating them, even though they kind of consented to the mistreatment, but it gets to a point where you don't even know how to stop it. Most people are not going to say, hey, change your whole personality if this is how you've always presented in their lives, right? So the ghost transitioning into an observer has a lot of rage, and they may be afraid it's not coming out. This person may appear reserved or distant, but they're doing the inner work to distinguish between silence as a fawning or freeze response and silence as a conscious choice. They're not suppressing who they are. They're slowly learning how to share themselves from a grounded and genuine and authentic place. Imagine if you're someone who used to feel like they had to over-explain yourself constantly so that you didn't feel misunderstood and therefore rejected. That's the healing here. They don't rush to respond. The observer doesn't rush to respond. They're pausing. They get in touch with their body and their emotions, and they actually allow their feelings to catch up with their brain instead of just reacting immediately, like the performer might. For someone who used to be in the ghost quadrant or the performer quadrant even, silence used to feel like failure. And when you transition to the observer category, it starts to feel like power. Like you're still silent, but it doesn't feel like the silence is controlling you. You're choosing it deliberately. And that's actually a good thing. We want that. We want you to be in control of your reactions. It is a huge part of any healing journey. But wait, there's one more thing. Some people may think they're an observer when they're actually a ghost because that person feels like they have internal safety because they're calm or contained, but they're actually emotionally shut down and avoiding vulnerability and dismissing their own needs entirely. And that would make them a ghost. Just because you're indifferent to your emotions doesn't mean you're internally safe. Okay, that's numbing out. Avoidance can sometimes masquerade as internal safety, but shutting down your needs isn't the same as being self-contained. True internal safety means you trust yourself to feel your feelings and not cut yourself off from them. Detachment and indifference is not the same as regulation. True safety means you don't have to disappear from yourself to stay calm. So if you feel like you have avoidant tendencies, consider the possibility that you're actually in the ghost category and not the observer category. And finally, we have the last quadrant. This is the quadrant we all want to be in, someone who is both high in internal safety and high in self-expression. I call this person the aligned self, or aligned. When someone is aligned, they're able to speak their truth while also staying rooted in internal safety. This is where we all want to get to. The aligned self knows how to express their needs and their desires and their boundaries with clarity and compassion, and they do not fear abandonment or rejection when they do it because they have that internal safety. They do not believe their behaviors are a reflection of their partner or their friend or their family. They don't believe their partner's behaviors or their family member, whoever we're talking about, they don't think that their behaviors say anything about the aligned person. The relationship has two independent people in them, and they behave and think independent of one another. It is not a reflection of the other person's experience. I am me, my friend is my friend. I am me, my partner is my partner. I am me, my mother is my mother. We are different people. And with that comes trust. The aligned person trusts their voice. They feel safe enough in their own body to stay regulated even when things get uncomfortable, and they don't perform for love or affection, or they don't disappear in order to feel like they have to keep it. They know their worth and they live from it. They understand that boundaries are not a way to push people away, but rather to filter their relationships so they get their needs met while still fostering connection with the other person. This is about protection in a healthy, communicative way. And remember, if you're hearing all of this and you're like, what? The point is not to achieve alignment overnight. It's to notice your patterns with compassion and to start building micro moments of internal safety and expression for yourself. Because the moment you start choosing you, even in very small, quiet ways, that is the moment you stop self-abandoning when another person enters the picture. So if self-abandonment shows up in different forms, such as ghosting, your performance, you're staying silent, you're over-explaining, then the real question becomes, why does it happen in the first place? When we talk about self-abandonment, we're not talking about a bad habit you just need more discipline to fix. We're talking about a deeply wired response your body learned a long time ago in order to keep you safe. So it's a little more ingrained than just a bad habit. This usually plays out in childhood or young adolescence. Maybe you were raised in a home where being good and quiet and invisible kept the peace. Maybe your caretaker or your parents praised you for being easy or the low maintenance kid or being so helpful. So you learned that love meant self-erasure in those ways. If you could perform those things, you get affection or love in return. The first step to stop abandoning yourself is building the skill of mindfulness and learning how to reflect about your behaviors. That's what talk therapy will teach you. Analyzing your past behaviors and how they made you feel and how they harmed you and what they were serving, like what function they served, and then using that analysis and that new information in the moments leading yourself to different behaviors, like learning how to spot it in the moment. If you're only doing this work in therapy and just looking backwards and not showing up for yourself every single day and being mindful of your daily choices and your emotions and your reactions, it's sort of like you're trying to drive a car while looking in the rearview mirror. It's not going to go well. It's going to lead to some car crashes. And it helps to analyze the past in order to understand your present experience. You need to actually work on making the subconscious conscious, and it's going to take effort. You need to live in the present when you're doing this work. So I want you to ask yourself, who did I have to be in order to be loved as a kid? And is that version still showing up in my relationships? What age do I regress to when I abandon myself in relationships? Sometimes I will affirm myself by saying, my name is Charlotte, I'm 34 years old, and I can handle this, because sometimes I regress to being a 14-year-old, and having those emotional skills and having those reactions to life. Remember that you are capable and you're older now and it's different now. You didn't choose to betray yourself in the ways that you are. You were taught that if you didn't do it, you would get rejected. So you adapted and you disappeared, and it worked until it didn't. Okay? And the fact that you're watching this video means you're realizing that the costs of self-abandoning are starting to outweigh the benefits. But there's one scary part of this healing process that I need you to be aware of before I give you some skills to work on your self-abandonment. And it's not going to be pleasant. There is a good chance you will lose people when you start to increase your self-expression and your internal safety. And I'm going to explain to you why this happens. This is not a you problem, okay? This is an alignment issue with the people in your life because you attracted people to you who benefit from you not being fully present with them. If you're a performer, you might be entertainment for them. If you're a ghost, you might take care of them and make everything about them. And that's what they need for whatever reason. I don't know them. I'm talking to you. This could also be your family. Very common that you filled in the gaps that they were not filling for themselves. And when more of the authenticity in yourself shows up, they might get weirded out. They don't know how to exist around you in this new form. They have feelings they're not dealing with. And the second you assert a boundary, they might get offended. They might start to push back on you. They might take it as a threat to their power over you. And I know using the word power may seem like dramatic, but right now, because you lack internal safety, you're outsourcing your power. And that leads to power imbalances in your relationships. And that's just what it is, even if that feels like really intense to say it that way. So be prepared for some pushback in that sense. And one thing that helped me on my journey to stop abandoning myself is to realize that I didn't self-abandon because I didn't love myself. That wasn't the reason. I did it because I believed that being myself would cost me love, and I wanted to prevent that. I was trying to protect myself. Having needs would make people run, and I didn't want that. And so in the beginning of my journey, when I did assert myself, people did leave. And all of my fears were proven true. But that's not because I'm difficult to be friends with or anything like that, but because those people chose me because I would cater to them and their needs. And the second I stopped doing that, they were out. I was a water hose, they were a thirsty garden, and the second I stopped supplying them with unlimited water, they were withering away and they needed to move on to another person who would pour into them without getting much back. And ultimately, I realized that losing those relationships were for the best. I was no longer going to give them unlimited sources of sustenance. I may be overextending this metaphor, but we're going to roll with it. So now that we understand our patterns and what we're getting into, let's talk about how to stop abandoning yourself. The first step for almost any healing journey, and if you're a subscriber of mine, you'll know this, it's repeated en masse, it's mindfulness and self-awareness. So the first thing you're going to do is to name the pattern, which you're already starting to do by watching this video. Figure out, when do you self-abandon? What triggers it? Almost every story of people who abandon themselves starts the same way. I didn't realize it was happening until it was already too late and I was already gone and obliterated in this relationship. This is the first betrayal you experience, the slow erasure of your needs, of your preferences, your opinions, just who you are, your authenticity, your presence. Whether it's a friend who always knows better or the partner who chips away at your confidence or a family dynamic where silence is safer than honesty, it starts with disconnecting from yourself. And that is usually a very gradual process that you don't see it happening until it hits you in the face at some point because you watched a YouTube video. Sorry. Sorry about that. My micro shift recommendation is to start journaling what you don't say each day if you feel like you are a ghost. What do you withhold to keep the peace? Write down your thoughts somewhere you can reflect back and see if there are other areas or patterns that you feel like you're withholding self-expression. If you tend toward the performer category, I would recommend you think back on how you behaved in certain interactions and ask yourself if you actually believed what you were saying and doing, or were you just being agreeable? Were you trying to get them to laugh? What were your motives? Were you trying to connect? Or were you trying to perform? Those are the differences between the ghost and the performer. Once you find a pattern, you're going to be able to move on to step 2, which is acknowledging the emotional payoff. So every single behavior you engage in has some sort of payoff. Even if it's a sabotaging behavior, which is what we talk about on this channel, self-sabotage and getting out of your own way, that's what we're all about here. Self-abandonment has payoffs as well. And it's a protection strategy. Like I said, you become the helper, the easy friend, the caretaker, the life of the party, whatever it is, for a reason. These are intelligent adaptations. It's not random, and it's not because you're a coward. It's not because of any of that. You are being smart and you are trying to survive. So ask yourself, what did disappearing protect you from? You might say something like, I thought if I expressed myself, my boyfriend would realize I wasn't worth the trouble. Or it could be, I thought if I didn't hold it all together, no one would, and our family needed someone to be the glue, so I stepped up. Or maybe it was being small felt safer than being alone. You betrayed yourself to feel chosen But this step is about realizing that they weren't choosing you, they were choosing a shell of you. You were hollowed out or wearing a mask the whole time. And that can really erode your self trust, which is why step 3 is rebuilding self trust with yourself through tiny actions. You don't build trust through big declarations. You build it by keeping promises to yourself in the small moments. It doesn't have to be anything huge. So I want you to think about what is one way you can choose yourself today without asking anyone for permission. If you need an example, I recommend finding a genuine reason to say no to someone who's asking you to do something you don't want to do. Don't over explain yourself. Don't apologize too much. Just do what's best for you without worrying about what happens next. And that doesn't have to be complicated. It can be as simple as declining an inconvenient phone call and calling them back later. It can be very, very simple. Now, if declining phone calls is not something you struggle with, don't use that example. But that's just something that if someone is worried about like not picking up the phone, for example, because if their boyfriend calls or their friend calls and they don't want them to abandon them, they may feel an urgency to call them back or to text them or to answer the phone when they're driving or something like that. That's what I'm saying. Remember, if it's scary without being dangerous, you're growing. And that's why sitting with the fear is step 4, because discomfort is not danger. You can learn to sit with discomfort without collapsing and falling apart. This is the hardest part. You will feel guilt when you choose yourself. You will feel fear when you stop over-functioning and over-managing other people. But that's not a sign you're doing it wrong. It's a sign you're stepping out of survival mode, which is what we want. Practice sitting with the discomfort of saying no or taking up space or potentially being disliked or misunderstood. Your body is going to rebel against you. But if you can remind it that it's safe by shaking it out or dancing or hitting a pillow or doing a bunch of other somatic practices that are healthy and will allow your nervous system to recognize that it just needs to chill out. Like it's being such a drama queen. Oh my God. I put a resource for some other somatic practices in the description if you want to check that out. I find that is a really good place to look for ideas if you don't know how to get in touch with your body like they're suggesting. Step 5 is to recalibrate your identity. You have to retire the self-abandonment identity. You've outgrown it. It's time to step into someone new. When you abandon yourself, you forget who you are. And you don't abandon yourself by accident. You become someone else in order to keep the love and the approval and the peace that you need because you don't have that internal safety. But now that habit is costing you more than it's giving. Everything had a cost-benefit analysis and you're redoing this cost-benefit analysis. So write a letter from that old version of you who self-abandoned to your present self. Thank them, then release them. I'm going to put an example on the screen that may give you some ideas of where to get started and what to write if you feel like you're blanking. And I will put that in the notes as well for if you're going to download those. My recommendation is to not rush this. Just let the voice say what it needs to say. And then when you're ready, close the letter and consciously release the identity. And step 6 is to get a little selfish. A big part of self-abandonment is putting your focus on everyone and everything outside of yourself because you don't have that internal safety yet, and it feels safer to lean into the external. And for this step, I want you to create one daily ritual that is just for you. Not productive, not performative, not to assist someone else. It is purely self-loyal. You're the only one you're going to live with for the rest of your life. Every single other relationship you have will end somehow. So you have to be a caregiver to yourself. And you know you can do it because you've done it for others. Remember, you don't need to fix everything today. You just need to stop disappearing, and you will achieve that with one choice at a time. As you do this work, you may find you have no clue what your authentic self actually is. So I would recommend checking out this video next, what it means to be authentic and how it will truly change your life. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.